Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, it's 4:30 Central Time, and that means it is time for the ViaMonstra Academy office hours with Johan and Andrew. This is where you can learn about updates in the systems management community, Microsoft Intune, ConfigMgr, a little bit of imaging, MDT, OSD, and all that good stuff. So prepare yourself for an hour of updates and for a chance to ask questions on pretty much any of those topics. So that being said, let's get going. All right. Hey there, Andrew. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Looking forward to another fun Wednesday afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm pretty dang good. It's been a good week. A lot of excitement and news and stuff going on in general. So that is
Yeah,
cool.
definitely. Looked like you were a bit of a busy man this morning. I saw some new stuff coming out from you and stuff coming out from the Technical Takeoff.
It's been a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
any favorites from your side there? What's going on this week?
Yeah. So I happen to catch a couple of the sessions so far. I've got a few from the Technical Takeoff. I've got a few more that I definitely want to catch up on here tomorrow. But the lap session I watched earlier today really stuck out to me. So they were talking. Microsoft was talking a little bit about if you'd like to share my screen, I do have just some screen caps up from the video. I would definitely recommend watching this, by the way, if your organization is invested in laps, especially if you've been looking for some improvements from Microsoft, including improvements based on storing password in Azure and things like that. It sounds like they are coming. Anyways, this video sort of touched on some of those things, and I just paused here at one of the slides that was referencing the new features that are coming for Azure AD, where we'll be able to store passwords in Azure on the device object, cloud-based management by retrieving passwords through MS Graph and the Azure portal, as well as being able to configure the settings or doing on-demand password rotation from what was the Endpoint Manager portal. So those were some of the Azure AD improvements, and then they also had some on-prem improvements where we've got some new group policy objects coming, new schema attributes, which they do explain. I believe it was Jay Simmons was the speaker on this session, so he explains why those new attributes are necessary. Some new password encryption improvements, password history. Managing DSRM account passwords stuck out to me. So a lot of cool stuff that I think is on the way for laps. I know we've heard a lot of people, you and I get asked a question about laps pretty commonly, Johan, and often we point to some of the community solutions from like our friends over at MS Endpoint Manager have a good cloud lap solution. But I think really a lot of people have been wanting something more of a native feel, like the standard laps that we've been used to for the last several years. So this is all good stuff. For me, this one I would recommend, as well as when is my device going to update? This was a cool, quick, maybe 10 or 15 minute session that I watched with several people, including Arya Carly, who owns updates. Several people from the user experience part of Windows Update were on this. And they were kind of just talking about when your devices will scan, download, install updates, when they'll reboot, what logic they're putting in place, not only to make sure your devices are staying updated, but do it in a way that doesn't disrupt the user experience, or as much as you can. And one nugget of information that I was telling you about yesterday that really stuck out to me, I didn't realize they were doing this. So from a sustainability perspective, it sounds like they're adding some new logic to not install and reboot, or to install and reboot the devices for an update on off hours, basically, when energy usage is low. So they're actually taking into account energy usage for a specific region and adding that into the logic of when your device will install and reboot, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know what that looks like in practice, but the fact that it was on their minds was pretty interesting to me. So that was another one I found pretty cool. I was happy I watched that one as well. Anything specific that's sticking out to you so far in what you've watched?
Yes, indeed. I'm just gonna connect up my screen and here we go. So not so very surprisingly, the Autopilot session that I talked about that I wanted to see last week in the office hours turned out to be pretty good. It was not what I expected, but it actually went through end to end the Autopilot process, like what happens in each of the different phases. So they spent some good time covering through that, and they also explained some workaround and gotchas that you might run into in each of these different steps. So as a sort of an introduction to what Autopilot is actually doing, this was pretty good. And it was only half an hour, so it's like, it doesn't take an entire evening to watch, obviously. Then there was a update for business session presented where they announced that they're going to release the new driver management, driver and firmware management for Intune or Microsoft Intune in Q2 2023. And they also announced that they're removing the preview marking on the exploit updates and feature updates feature or policies it is in Intune. So that was something that stood out. There was also one session I really enjoyed, and I'm going to watch that one again because it was absolutely great. It was the debate going cloud attached versus cloud only, where there were 4 people from Microsoft and one of the MVPs from Iceland joining Johannes, and basically taking in questions. So this was one of the few like live sessions. The other one was more like pre-recorded demos, but this was live. And if you start to scroll down into the comments here, you find a good chunk of comments from that hour that this session ran. So even though I don't agree with all of the answers in that session, this was good stuff. Highly recommended. So we'll make sure to share these links as usual. But this was stood out to me, and I still have a few sessions to go through on this. So yeah, that was good stuff. Other things going on. I've been busy writing a blog post, something that I thought would be very simple, turned out to be a little more challenging than I thought. I was like, all right, I'm going to do the modern approach of running scripts on sequences because, as you probably know, in ConfigMgr, Microsoft added in a good few years back the ability to run scripts embedded in the sequence so that you don't have to create a package, distribute the package, wait for that to happen, and then you can finally run the script. Now the challenge became when I actually needed to run that as a different user. So what happened was that I had a script that I was pretty happy with. I started up with looking at some of the community scripts to join or add a machine to a group during deployment. And normally I would use a web service for that, but in this case I couldn't because customers simply didn't want to. And the example I had since previously, because I had a few VB scripts doing this over the years, I had a PowerShell script that did it, they did not support multiple domains. And guess what? This customer had multiple domains, so I had to modify the script quite a bit to make that to work. So anyhow, what I started to do, and this is something I recommend in general, if you're troubleshooting something that is supposed to happen in this case, in the end of a deployment, don't add it to your normal deployment sequence, because then you can do like one test every like 30 minutes or so. So I ended up creating a smaller sequence that did just what I wanted to do. And I ran that one over and over until I got it to work. So here's what I have. Here's the script. It's just a PowerShell script I embedded into the sequence. So not too fancy, 70 some lines of code. And in general, if your script is not more than a page or two long, you can absolutely embed it into the sequence like this. If your script is like Morris Daly's invoke apply driver script, or the script for modern driver management, with this thousands of lines of code, would not recommend adding it into the sequence embedded, because that's going to blow up the size of the sequence itself. But anyway, I added it there. You can add a group name, of course. In this case, I wanted to add a device into a group called ViaMonstra Computers. One gentleman pointed out on LinkedIn that you obviously can use a variable for this, and absolutely yes, everything you have on the parameters can be a variable, so that's a good comment. But I wanted to run this as a specific account. And this account, I have granted permissions to join machines or add machines to that group. And in order to do that, you need to have the right member permission on that group. But every time I run it, it would fail. And it would fail with something that I didn't quite expect it. And I actually saved a screenshot of it somewhere here. So when you embed scripts in a sequence, what ConfigMgr does, it actually creates a temporary script on the computer. So in this case, it created a script with this particular name in that particular folder. Guess which folder my user did not have access to, because the service account was a normal user? Well, that folder. So I had to get creative. And first I thought about just using the set local group member commandlet in PowerShell. But again, I couldn't run PowerShell. So it's a catch-22. So I resorted back into a classic net command to give user temporary admin rights so that the user could run the script in that folder. And then I removed the user from that admin group and I was done. And this, of course, this sequence I deployed as just an available deployment when I was testing. And then when I finally was done with everything, that's where I took the very same concept and just added it into not that one, this one, added into the group there. So long story short, if you put a little bit of extra steps in, you can absolutely embed script and run them as different users. I did get a follow-up question on Twitter earlier today. What about if I'm not using ConfigMgr? You can do similar things in the MDT sequence. In fact, something that you quite easily can do in MDT that you really can't do in the ConfigMgr sequence. You could run an entire section of a sequence as a different user. So, for example, in our hydration kits that we use for deployment, where we install SQL and a few other components, I want to run that as a domain user rather than the local admin account. So you will see that in our ConfigMgr sequence, for example, there is a step that where we change who we run the sequence as, and we reboot the computer, tricking MDT into using a different account. So if you want to borrow that logic and use in your MDT sequences, by all means, steal it from the hydration kit and you can use it. So that there are some applications, especially server apps, that sometimes needs to be run as a domain account. Otherwise, it's not entirely happy. And yeah, SQL is one of them. All right. So that was that. Any questions out there? Any questions at all? We'll be happy to answer.
Bring them on.
Yeah. Let's see. There was a question from coming in on YouTube here. How to update the OS in my sequence so I don't need to have to add the October ISO or November ISO into the sequence. Well, in this case, extracting the WIM file from the ISO. Well, there are a few different options of doing so. But in ConfigMgr environment, there is a bit of a challenge updating the image, because if you have a sequence that's using, say, the September image at the moment, like this one here, and you go ahead and update that package that this sequence is using, either through a PowerShell script or use the built-in scheduled task that I kind of don't like, because it doesn't update the entire stuff. It updates only the update stuff in it. So it doesn't update setups. If you're using upgrade packages and whatnot, it's not really complete. But it doesn't matter. If you either replace the WIM file or you update the existing WIM file, it's still going to cause a content distribution of that file, of that image. And while that is working, you will find that deployment in your environment will be failing. So what I typically recommend doing to prevent that from happening, if you want to do that kind of upgrade more seamlessly, add in a second image. So keep your whatever, say that this is your September one, just to give an argument. Add in a new one that is the October. And I recommend extracting it from the ISO if you're just using a thin image. Update it with either WinBridge or Ghost Builder if you're using that. But add that as a separate image, distribute it. And once that distribution is done, then you simply go into your sequence. But that was a new version of Windows 10, was it not?
You're way in the future.
Yeah, I'm a little bit ahead here. But then I will go in and just find the apply OS step. Where are you, my friend? Here. And I will select that one and select the second image and hit OK. Because this is just a policy update. That one takes effect pretty much immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And it won't break any existing deployments. I even see some organizations, they have two sequences, they alternate in between, but I usually find that it's actually adding the image and updating that one. That's the time-consuming part, because if you have a large environment, you have a lot of distribution points, it can take a good while to get that 4 gig image out there everywhere, and you don't want to break any existing stuff while you're doing so. So
we tend to do something like that with boot images whenever we've got an updated boot image, and then just since we have dozens of task sequences, take some of the PowerShell commandlets, figure out which one's using the old one, and then update it with the new one. And I think you could probably do something similar here, right?
I mean,
It'd be a little harder.
I mean, everything you do in the console can be automated through the PowerShell commandlets in ConfigMgr. So you can definitely have a script like this one here. Mm-hmm. There was the builder that will update the WIM file to the latest version, or this script here that if you have, say that this one is actually the October ISO that you downloaded, it will simply extract that WIM file real quick. You can add more steps to this script to also import that in the console and create an image package. You can even update the distribution points, and you can wait until they are done. And then through PowerShell, you can modify the apply operating system step in there as well. If you're looking for some inspiration there, I wrote a blog post on Dart a while back, a little PowerShell script on how to add that the right way. And in that script, that was not the script, was it? Here. I added in a little logic in the bottom here, where I was just looping and waiting until the distribution of that boot image was done before I continued. So you can definitely automate that full end to end. But since it's only once a month, as long as you update or automate the update of that image, it's not that much hard work to just add it in here and change your sequence. So those the builder, Winbridge, extract from ISO, write your own PowerShell script to do the update. Because this step here, if you do a scheduled updates, I don't like that. So yeah, hope that answered the question somehow. The beautiful thing about the OST builder and Winbridge is that you don't have to download a new ISO. You can just run it against whatever you have.
Yeah.
You can even have the original media from, like a year ago. They will still patch it up to the latest version. Anything like that there, Andrew?
No, we pretty much followed the same thought process as you there.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Chris is asking on YouTube. I've read some issues related to the new Windows 10 October patch and OSD domain join failing. Yes, that can happen. Microsoft did some security hardening on that one. We covered that briefly last week. Do you have that support article handy, Andrew?
Not handy. I'll see if I can pull it up quickly. We can race.
You can race, yeah.
Yes, I think this is it. The net join, domain join hardening.
All right, let's see where you put that. Do you have it on your screen?
Yes.
All right, let me show that screen then.
So I think this is it right here. And I know there were definitely some Twitter threads about this. So basically, after this October 11th, 2022 update, during a domain join, the client will perform additional security checks before attempting to reuse an existing computer account. The reuse attempt will be permitted if the user attempting the operation is the creator of the existing account. Account reuse attempt will be permitted if the account was created by a member of domain administrators. So use a service account basically is I think, and do not use a domain admin account to join your computers to the domain during a sequence is I think what this is all boiled down to. So depending on and add any additional color in here if you'd like, Johan. The way I understood it, if you were pretty much already using service accounts, for the most part, you were in the clear.
As long as you haven't changed that service account, yes.
Yes, exactly. So if you try to change that service account and then do an OSD and a domain join on that computer again, it will fail. I think you just have to, was the workaround just delete the machine object and just let it rejoin fresh again?
Yeah, because then there is nothing to reuse, and that's what this one is really about.
There we go, right there. Rename the machine and join using a different account name, so it'll create a new object, or if the existing account's stale, delete it and then attempt to join again.
Yeah. I did see someone tweeting about adding an extra permissions for user account control to the service account. Also solved the problem, but I didn't have a chance to test that one yet. I can show you some what we currently do for these accounts, and that is that we have a script that we're using for years. Let me just reconnect to this one because the screen resolution changed a little bit. I'm gonna put you back. Here we go. And that was another thing I was playing around with. But let's see. So this one here, this is a PowerScript we put together for one of our books actually back in the days. But here we are using a good old tool that comes with the RSA tools, or the Active Directory tools, where we give the minimal permissions exactly what a user account need for an OU to be able to deal with not just adding in new machines, but to also update existing objects. And if I understood that Twitter thread right, there was just another user account control that was need to be added in here to work around these changes in the process. Now, there is nothing that prevents you from, like the script that I showed earlier in the sequence, where we had something happening that is doing stuff in Active Directory. You can, of course, call a web service or something that effectively deletes that object early on, and that forces it to create a new object later. I've seen organizations doing that already as early when they start the process. In WinPE, they call a web service to do something in Active Directory, like deleting an account, to give that some time to replicate around until the machine actually finishes laying down the OS image and reboot in to Windows for the first time. And at that point, it will join the domain. But that means that the account is long gone by then, and then it will be just a normal account join and with a new service account and all that good stuff. So, yeah, maybe a little bit of an annoyance, but I mean, security changes are typically for a good reason. And if you can work it around fairly simple, I won't lie sleepless over it. All right. Another comment on YouTube. Happy Wednesday. Yep, it is Happy Wednesday. Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
Anything else there, Andrew?
Yeah, Chad's actually asking a question on LinkedIn regarding a blog post that you put together. It looks like regarding branch cache. I don't know if you wanted to pull this up while I ask the question, but he was asking if you could talk more about warning 1 on the deduplication section of that article. ConfigMgr docs only mention excluding content source folders from dedupe. Why should other folders like doink MCC be excluded from dedupe?
So in general, I mean, data duplication, just to give you guys an idea of what we're talking about here, is a Windows Server feature only available in Server. I'm starting to run out of disk space too. This is great. But if I have a folder here where I have a lot of static content that doesn't change too much, my VMs, for example, I have almost 5 terabytes of VMs occupying about 700 gig on my disk in this case. Because data deduplication takes a knife and chunks them into small chunks. And that means that it's a great candidate to use also for a content library in ConfigMgr, or the ConfigMgr or content library on all your distribution points that you have here. Because it will basically shrink the disk space that is used for this. And there is one benefit when used together with peer-to-peer and branch cache, and is that since branch cache is used in the same data deduplication algorithm as the Windows service does, it means that it has already pre-calculated most of the data that branch cache needs, and that means that the server doesn't have to do much to serve the content, and it's just, all right, here you go. But I would not use data deduplication on folders that haven't been tested for it. Microsoft already tested packet sources, as was mentioned here in the LinkedIn comment, and realized it didn't work. So that's why they put in a note saying, well, don't do this. The doink part, I'm pretty sure have not been tested at all. So in this case, I have one of my DPs. This one is configured as a cache server. So this one here, let's see. This one is set up as a cache server. And only 150 gigs allowed, but I'm only using like 50 at the moment. But this is caching all content that is coming down from delivery optimization. Can be updates, Win32 apps, and whatever. The challenge with that content is that the way Microsoft constructed all their updates and other stuff, it's heavily ineffective for data deduplication. So even if it would work to dedupe the doink cache or the MCC cache, I wouldn't even try doing it because it's not going to give you anything back. Had Microsoft instead used like Vim images or regular cab files or something that is a much better compression algorithm for branch cache, I would have probably considered testing it. But for now, I would recommend not doing it. I don't see what it would help, even if it did work. So, long answer to a short question.
All right. We've got a couple more that have come in. Matt on YouTube is saying his company uses the old MBAM, so how can I use BitLocker Management from SCCM or move BitLocker to Intune? Which one is the best? Might let you start out with that one, Johan, if you've got anything to add, because I haven't really used those tools.
Well, I have. I was actually working on a migration with a customer that reached out, and they had gotten a quote from another company how much time it would take to convert them from using MBAM over to BitLocker Management and ConfigMgr. And the quote was, yeah, it's going to take 7 days, so 56 hours at a stupid rate, basically. And I'm like, no, so you just need to get rid of your group policies. And then you create new policies in ConfigMgr, and then you're pretty much done. We did it in 3 hours, end to end. So it's actually fairly simple. And Maurice has one of the better posts on the topic. He did like a 3-part series on going from MBAM to BitLocker Management. Yeah. So if you haven't seen these, this is basically a step-by-step what you have to do that journey. As long as you verify that there are no Active Directory group policies left, you also need to modify your sequences because the escrowing is different of the key during deployment. And it took Microsoft actually a good while to add in escrowing for BitLocker Management. So if you have a ConfigMgr site server like this one here, where I have enabled BitLocker Management and started to create all these policies that you need here for the different disks and whatnot, then in your sequence, what you have to do is simply go to your BitLocker step, this one here, and force it to use, instead of what you may have used before, because it didn't support it, you now have to select this one here. And this will put them into the ConfigMgr database. And as we mentioned earlier here in this office hours, it will be encrypted, unlike MBAM, where all the recovery keys were not encrypted in the MBAM database. You can still hash them out with a PowerShell script if you really need to look them up outside of the normal help desk portal that is still here available. But it's not too bad to go through the journey of changing from MBAM to BitLocker Management. And in general, I would recommend going that approach, even though it's like no immediate need for it. The second MBAM is still going to be around. Originally, it was only to April 2024, but they increased that until 2026 or something to give organizations time to migrate over. Some organizations, they simply switch that workload over to Intune, etc. But if you're using a lot of imaging, ConfigMgr, whatnot, well, it kind of makes sense to have it here as well. Yeah.
So have you played around much with using Intune and Azure AD for that management? Because in a particular scenario that I've been looking at recently, having not had those tools, I've just been following a couple posts from Brooks Pepin that really does a really nice job of spelling out how to go through the configuration of Intune, BitLocker with Intune.
No, there is a good chunk of organizations using Intune only for BitLocker management, and Brooks post that it's covering the best practices part. I think he only actually had that in his title. Do you happen to have that post up somewhere?
Yeah, I've got two that I've been referencing actually.
All right, let me. How about that? Yeah.
Yeah. So here he's got a beginner's guide to managing BitLocker with Intune.
I haven't seen that one, but I saw the one that had like a best practice in its title.
Is it this one? 3 things you should know?
I think so.
So this has things like how to escrow existing keys to Azure AD, managing multiple keys on an Azure AD object. Automatic encryption requires a logged in user. So there are some good recommendations here on how to do some operational type things. Was there maybe another one you were thinking of as well?
Well, good Lord. It probably was that one. I was in my mind it had the word best practices in the title, but it probably didn't because I cannot find it.
Okay.
Or maybe it was the Twitter thread that was covering it.
Well, and I do know in this beginner's guide as well, he talks about what I think I would consider some best practices in regards to some of the base settings that he recommends within the policy, as well as encryption methods and things like that. I think this is the post where he may talk about...
Yeah, that's the one. There's a bunch of screenshots of the recommended configurations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the one. Yeah.
This
My
is
bad on the title. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. So I'll make sure that we get these links out there. But this beginner's guide is sort of what we've been following through, because it does have a lot of those things in here. You know, where you look at this policy, and if you don't know a ton about BitLocker, it can definitely be overwhelming. And I think Brooks does a really good job of describing not only what you should set here, but why, in his opinion, you should set it.
Yeah, and he actually had a little thread. I just posted a link in the chat to you there, Andrew. You can bring it up on your screen. Things that could be improved. So if there is anyone from the Intune team happen to watch this episode, there's some homework that you might be interested in looking into. But just some improvements in general, and I thought they were quite brilliant.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. Let's see. Dum dum dum. Is there a way to easily see who deleted a resource in ConfigMgr? Well, ConfigMgr does have a lot of auditing on by default, and there are audit reports that you can run to see which user that did what in ConfigMgr. Let's see if I have something I can bring up.
I also had up, I was going to suggest the status messages, maybe.
Yeah.
The audit status messages should, and I don't know
definitely.
if it would have that resource specifically, but if we pull them up in my lab environment here, then you can see resources being deleted and created, modified, modifying package properties of modifying a task sequence.
Yeah, I mean, I have. Can I steal your screen?
Oh, please.
All right. So there is an audit log or an audit report that taps into these messages that Andrew was showing. And if you run that report, pick a user in your environment, so pick my admin account in this case, and it will get pretty good details what's going on here. Apparently, an admin has been working on some of the sequences here. Even though it says it's a package, but it's actually it's a sequence. But yeah, pretty good detailed. I forgot how long these are stored, but I'd like to say at least 3 months, maybe more. Can export them to a spreadsheet, and we will actually give an idea on how long or how far away they go without me having to click through a billion pages in the report. So audit messages, put it in my documents folder here, and bring it over to a machine where I actually have Excel.
I'm curious to see what you have. I have messages back to May 2nd, which is an odd time considering it's October 26th.
So 10.12 is the latest one. Sorry, the newest one that I had in that one. And it goes back to April. So 6 months-ish, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a couple days before mine ends too.
Yeah. Don't remember on top of my head if you can configure that threshold or how long it will keep it, but since it's in the database, you have backups, you can always figure things out. You can write your own scheduled task that reports just audit data over to a separate table somewhere in a different database. You always have it available. Should someone come and ask me, like, okay, which not that bright person deleted this object 7 months ago? Stuff like that. So, yeah. But this is what I like about it. It's actually both ConfigMgr and Intune is that how well they are by default in auditing stuff. I know in our Intune trainings and whatnot, we go through both Azure auditing that you like, Andrew, and the Intune auditing, that there is always a trail for everything that is going on. And I sometimes use that even for troubleshooting, try to figure out what's going on. It's helpful. All right. Let's see, what else do you have there, Andrew?
I've got another question coming in on YouTube, wanting to get better at application packaging using PSADT. Is there anything that you do standard for most applications, such as checking for old software installs and things like that? PSADT I have not played around with too much. I know it's pretty widely used, or commonly used at least, but I don't personally have a lot of experience with it.
Well, first of all, for those of you who are new to this or haven't heard about it, the PowerShell App Deployment Kit or Application Deployment been around for a good decade, and we have customers that are using this as a standard for every single package they create, just to have sort of a baseline. And I think that is pretty much a good reasoning as any. Back in the days when before ConfigMgr was ConfigMgr, when it was SMS, that was very common to have like batch file wrappers like an install.cmd. So basically every application had that one, but then of course the content in that one was different. And then as technology matured, we switched over to VB-Script, legacy now as well, and then also further to PowerShell. And that means that if you have a lot of different applications, at least in the very most simple way, to me it makes sense to have some sort of standard way to do things in a company. I don't recommend repackaging application if whatever the vendor provide works. If the only thing I have to do, like this ClickView example, where we needed to do a few things prior to launching the installer, then launching the installer, do a bit of logging, we did some profile modification when it were done. If that's all it takes to fix a good installation, I would not fire up like Admin Studio and spend 20 hours trying to repackage something. And organizations were outsourcing their entire packaging to like image or MSI factories almost. And I think that's often kind of a waste of time and resources. If the vendor has an installer that is okay, and you're just looking for a standardized way of doing it, wrappers like this and advanced wrappers like this, I'm sorry for calling this a wrapper, it's more like a solution than anything. It's way more than just a wrapper. But the thing is, it's a standardized way of working with apps. Highly recommend to have a standard. It's not bad at all. It's easy to troubleshoot, easy to work with than to having like 52 packages where the installers works in 52 different ways. That's my take on it, at least. I mean, you will find a lot of help out there on this toolkit. It's quite widely used. If you search for this in community and whatnot, that there is a lot of articles available and troubleshooting tips and whatnot.
Definitely. And there was actually a follow-up to that, not just PSADT specifically, but any scripting that goes with app packaging. One that I might just ask if you could pull up, Johan, your script for putting large applications into a WIM file in addition to that wrapper, I think is a good somewhat recent tip that people seem to be using more and more.
Yes, I have it somewhere here. Yeah.
Pretty easy to find.
Yeah.
Good name.
No, but it's just a PowerShell script that takes something you already have and just smacks it to a WIM file using a native PowerShell command.
Mm-hmm.
And then as your application installer, this would be a small version of the wrapper I showed you earlier, but this one just gives you the basic of actually mounting that WIM file, running the installer, and then dismounting the WIM file when you're done. You will find a good few articles out there, organizations starting to use WIM files, especially for applications that are interesting, that have a lot of small files, making it highly ineffective to download over HTTPS, stupidly ineffective to do anything or peer-to-peering with. My favorite example, I've probably shown it like 52 times by now, but I'm going to do it again because I can.
I was going to say some vendors that start with the letter A pop into mind immediately.
Yeah, but think of this one, 3D Studio Packs. It's not very big, but it's just massive and the number of files it has. Put that in a WIM file, it downloads in a minute and a half. Put it not in a WIM file, and you will see that it takes like 42 minutes to download. Just because this. Yeah.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah. But shorthand version, wrappers, not a bad idea at all to use. A lot of organizations are using that for their ConfigMgr packages. Intune don't really have a choice because you have to package anything in Intune as a very specific package format, but you can still use wrappers in Intune. I saw a post from Johan just the other day. They were updating their Office installation script. So they were using wrappers in Intune to install Office instead of using the native package type that is in Intune for Office, which leaves some room for improvement. So yeah, good stuff.
Awesome. All right, we got another question coming in from YouTube. Is there a recommended way to download MSIXes from the Microsoft Store? I know we can just package our own through the packaging tool, but I'm curious if there's another way for us lazies. That's not being lazy, that's being efficient with your time.
As far as the MSIX goes, I actually haven't worked with any customer who is using it at all.
Yeah, same. And any of the things that I've done with the store apps, I've largely tried to do through built-in integrations that we have in Intune or ConfigMgr.
I mean, I've downloaded Apex packages, the traditional ones that has always been available in the used to be called Business Store. Oh, it's going away now, but yeah. No, I have not played around with MSIX. If anyone have, I happen to watch this, by all means, chime in with the comment in the feed. I'll be happy to share it, but it's an unmarked territory for me.
Yep. All right, let's see. Another one from YouTube. We have two-factor enabled for all users, and we push out OneDrive known folder move, which seems to cause issues because MFA needs to be fulfilled before auto signing in. Any suggestions there? This, in a follow-up comment to that, this could be any SSO application that would auto sign in. I'm surprised that the token isn't fulfilled when going through enrollment in Autopilot. I think I'd have to do some more research on that because I configured the auto sign in for OneDrive the other day, and at the time, I don't think I received an MFA challenge, even though it's configured. That said, that didn't have known folder move in the process either, and I could have already done MFA with something else. It's interesting. Have you run into that, Johan?
Nothing that rings a bell, but that can actually be a question that we take home until next week. That's a good one.
It is. I'm actually quite interested in what that experience looks like.
Yeah. So until next week on that one.
Yeah, we'll make a note of that one for sure. Another question coming in from YouTube: what are the any good blogs for Windows 10 Autopilot for beginners?
Actually, the video that we mentioned earlier, even though it was labeled as an Autopilot notes from the field, it actually has a really good overview of the process. So that video will be a good start as well. Then, even though they are a little bit older, Michael Niehaus, when he was still with the Autopilot team, he put together a bunch of introductory blogs and videos to Autopilot that I highly recommend seeing. Even though there have been some minor changes since, like 97% of that information is still very much valid. And beyond that, if you want to go a little bit more advanced, or learn more about what's going on, both Oliver Kieselbach as well as Rudy Ohms is, I would say, that the go-to folks in terms of blogs containing Autopilot stuff. Let's see if I can find them here real quick. We have mentioned him many times on the office hours, but this blog here, tagging for Autopilot, is definitely something I would review. So we make sure to post that link, and then of course Rudy owns the same call for something, his blog.
All for cloud.
Yeah. Mr. MBAM on Twitter, for those of you that follow him. Yeah, call for cloud. This is also a great resource on Autopilot information. I mean, the Microsoft documentation is not bad around the area either. There's not as detailed as these posts are, but they still are there. I think the good alias still works. That was used to be like an AKA MS Windows Autopilot alias. Let's see if that one is still alive and kicking. Yep, sure is. So I would start with these resources. The video that was presented. There was some Ignite videos from earlier years that is not bad either. Shameless plug, we do training on it. That's a start as well.
We'd be happy to have you.
But yeah, this is kind of what I like about the systems management community in general. There is a lot of good information out there. All right.
All right. Looks like we've got follow-up comment. Continue to investigate the MSIX packages from the Microsoft Store. Sounds good. We'd love to hear if you come up with a solution. And then a question: we have duplicate unknown computer devices left over from deleting one of our old primary sites. Do you know how we can go about deleting them?
Yes, that was a query that you had to run. First of all, I just brought up the Nihau's blogs as well. Was someone also confirming here on the YouTube thread that, or YouTube comments that, yeah, definitely recommend that one. But yeah, also good resource. But go back to the question about unknown computer objects. I actually worked with a customer just recently on that. So what it's about is that ConfigMgr has support for deploying sequences to unknown devices and had for a long time. And that means there is a collection that is by default here that has 2 unknown objects in them. Sometimes when you look at the resource ID for these objects, you will have different numbers in different environments that you're not supposed to. You're supposed to have these numbers, 352 and 353 in the end here. But sometimes we have 354 and 355, and you suddenly realize, okay, I actually don't have 2, I have 4. The trick is to delete the oldest one, and you do that with the SQL query. Now, do Microsoft like that you run SQL queries that delete stuff from the ConfigMgr database? They don't. They claim it's not supported. So if you want to be in really supported grounds, you will simply call Microsoft support, and they will remote into you to run the same query to delete them. So it's up to you. Just delete the 2 oldest one, and you're good to go. This was a bug back in the days, but I'm still seeing it showing up at times. Even here seems very concerned about the unknown computer objects. Yeah, I know, it's outrageous. Yeah, he says run the script. Yep.
Yeah. That's what I heard.
All right.
All right.
We are on. Dang, that hour went by quickly. See, there was one final question. Good tutorial for getting started with managing devices in Intune using Graph. Nothing that comes to mind immediately, but that's definitely something we can look into and publish next week here in Office Hours. So, yeah. Dang,
we're leaving with some homework today.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us, for asking all these good questions. And thank you, Andrew, for being here. And we see you guys hopefully next week. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.